Greetings viewer, nothing to report. Except for one of the most meteoric rises in the entire history of Fire Emblem. When creating certain characters, intelligent systems must have known they would be widely popular, like Lucina or the Free House leaders, while with others I suspect they had expected they would be a bigger hit than they ended up being, like certain characters from Fates and Engage. But no one could have predicted the extreme levels of popularity the Gatekeeper would reach. Right? How did he even do it in the first place? And was his rise truly as organic as it looked from the outside looking in? To answer those questions and more, we need to start at the very beginning, which is July 29th, 2019, the release date of Fire Emblem Free Houses. Anyone active in Nintendo circles at the time didn't need sales numbers to deduce that the game was a massive success, eclipsing even the likes of Awakening from a couple of years prior. It felt like everyone was talking about it and playing it, and as it always goes with games like that, most of the focus is on the early game content. I mean, Free Houses takes like 50 plus hours to beat. The entire concept of Free Houses discourse didn't even exist yet, no one had been able to reach that part. Instead, the talk of the town was why you couldn't pet the dogs and cats, memes about Sedef, and of course, the star of this video, the Gatekeeper. In a game with a rather serious tone and at times bleak content, he stood out as a cheery, laid-back and optimistic figure that many people look forward to talking to when a new chapter rolled around. His trademark catchphrase made him stand out compared to other generics found around the monastery, as did his voice, and it made him resonate with the fanbase in a way many actual playable characters would be jealous of. Fan art, memes, social media posts, it was all there. People who didn't own the game must have thought this was some major character, instead of a generic NPC that people clamored around. But it's that term that I suspect played a huge part in the initial success of the Gatekeeper. Generic NPC. In terms of design, the Gatekeeper factually is a generic soldier. No one would be able to refute that. But when it comes to performance and the impression he makes, he is everything but generic. It's that juxtaposition that made people gravitate towards him. But what I've always wondered is to what extent intelligent systems planned for this and meant for us to love the Gatekeeper. It's a question we might never get a confirmed answer to. The only folks that know are far away in an office in Kyoto, and game director Toshiyuki Kusakihara hasn't been answering my calls, so all we have to go off here are deductions based on what the game tells us. And let me say, I think there are some strong hints that IS did in some way expect the Gatekeeper to catch on. Maybe not to the level it ended up at, but they knew they had potential here. The first sign of that is in the choice of voice actors. In the original Japanese version, the Gatekeeper is voiced by Shinobu Matsumoto, who is most certainly not a superstar or anything, but he's also the voice of Gaius from Awakening, one of the most popular characters at the time of that title's release, especially in Japan. Something similar happened in the English dub. The person behind the voice that most of you watching will know is Cal McCarley, who you may also know as the voice of Alm from Shadows of Valentia, you know, the literal main character of the last game. Compare these two names to the rest of the voice cast and something stands out. The Gatekeeper is the only generic monastery character who is not voiced by either someone who also handles a major character in Free Houses, or is a small-time actor brought in to do additional voices. Both Shinobu Matsumoto and Cal McCarley are frankly overqualified for the minor role they play in Free Houses, and it is quite interesting to recognize if you keep in mind that, in the year 2025, the Gatekeeper is considered an actual part of the game's cast. It's almost as if IS knew there was potential here, and decided to bring a more experienced voice actor than you might expect, particularly one who had previously also done voice work for another beloved character. And that's not where the hints end. In the Silver Snow and Azure Moon routes of the game, during the exploration of Chapter 15, Dorothea imitates the Gatekeeper, showing that the developers had already realized this guy would stand out to audiences. This can also be seen in Crimson Flower, where the Gatekeeper is replaced by his brother, apparently, after the time skip, which is obviously just a simple excuse from the devs to not cut what they had probably already realized was an enjoyable addition to the game. Again, these pieces of evidence are not conclusive, and I would still think that even IS were surprised by the massive popularity the Gatekeeper ended up getting. But I think it's also fair to say it didn't come totally out of the blue. They set up some bait and we took it in a way that surprised even them. Maybe that's a good way to put it. But whether they expected it or not, one thing is for certain. They sure knew how to capitalize on it. By the time Free Houses' content was complete, the Gatekeeper had already had several handouts that acknowledged his popularity. Oh, and on that note, I feel like I should clarify that no, the Gatekeeper's popularity is not a Western-only thing, as I have heard people suggest in the past. He was just as much of a beloved figure in Japan, which is exactly why IS went so hard on joining in on the joke, if you can even call him that. Because yeah, when Cindered Shadows was released, several of the new supports featured cameos from the Gatekeeper, like Constance and Byleth's S support and Constance C support with Balthus. Abyss also had its own Abyss Keeper, undoubtedly inspired by the new hero of the fandom. And yes, there was a not so subtle setup to the new and arguably biggest chapter of the story of the Gatekeeper. Choose Your Legends 5, the edition from 2021. This edition made the Gatekeeper a votable character for the first time, and to the surprise of absolutely no one, he swept. With a near record number of votes of around 70,000, the Gatekeeper came out on top with a huge lead. Mind you, that is more votes than the two most voted women of that year, Marianne and Erica, combined. Only Edelgard has ever received more votes than the Gatekeeper, and with how the current player numbers of Fire Emblem Heroes look, that might very well be a second place he doesn't have to worry about ever giving up. A few months later, he would become the first generic, unnamed unit to ever be added to Heroes, when Brave Gatekeeper was unleashed upon our mobile phones. While he has definitely fallen behind the power curve since his release, his art is still as amazing as ever, looking more like a full art cipher card than the usual full body we get from Heroes. It even incorporates the pets from the monastery to truly tie everything together and become a representation of the early days of Free Houses' release, a moment where Fire Emblem truly felt like the biggest thing in gaming for a moment. Oh, and he received his own Instagram filter. Suck on that, Edelgard. When Free Hopes released a year later in 2022, that same initial feeling wasn't recreated, but the game does a very good job of expanding the world of Fodlan, despite being set in an alternate timeline. In this timeline, the majority of the game is not set at the monastery, but instead, each route mostly takes place on the road, turning the hub area into a base camp. However, this doesn't mean the Gatekeeper sits out. The man was a Choose Your Legends winner now, he had to feature. And so, he returns to guard the gate of your camp, but I will say, while I too greatly enjoyed the Gatekeeper's addition to Free Houses, he felt a little too forced here. Don't get me wrong, this is not remotely something serious or major enough to actually consider a problem, but I don't know, I feel like his appearance in this game reminds me a bit too much of the first word of the phrase I just used, had to feature. As in, we don't really know where else to put him, he doesn't really fit, just chuck him in. I understand why they did it, but he doesn't hit the same in this game as he does in Free Houses. Now, while I may sound a little negative about the Gatekeeper's implementation in Free Hopes, there is one more element that is undeniably incredibly cool. If you beat 2 of the free paths in this game and then begin your third on New Game Plus, you unlock the Gatekeeper as a playable hidden character. And unlike the other secret units, Rhea, Sophis and Arval, he can actually be used in story chapters, as well as participate in all activities in the base camp. He has no supports, which is a shame, but he does have his very own paralogue. It doesn't dive deeper into his character and background though, which is a bit of a missed opportunity I would say for such a hard to obtain chapter, but it is a cool little throwback to the Battle of Eagle and Lion and shows Chess stumbling his way into it. It doesn't have much to do with the Gatekeeper though, and while super cool, also shows the reason why the love for the Gatekeeper probably won't stick, like say the love for Edelgard, Dimitri or Claude. He isn't really a character, he doesn't have a name, a backstory or a gripping design. He's a fan favorite, an inside joke and a beloved meme, but unlike the true main characters of Fodlan, he will eventually become a figment of a bygone era. A talking time capsule from the days Free Houses ruled the world, and one of the most interesting out-of-game stories of the Fire Emblem franchise. We will have more beloved characters, we will have more memes and mascots to rally around as a fanbase, like our Lord and Savior Sami. But the way the Gatekeeper hit the scene and took us all by storm, perhaps even IS included, is something we may possibly never see again. Were you a Gatekeeper fan from the earliest days? Or did you never really get the hype? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Fire Emblem content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.